Venkat, nice to meet you. Hi, I'm Thijs.
Good to see you.
Welcome to Denbosch City. We've arranged some nice transport for you. It's been quite a couple of busy days with DevOps, going back to DevOps again or to the main event. Yeah, since you're an Agile developer, how do you manage? How do you cope with all those events?
It's easy not to think about it. So I kind of live by the moment and take every day as it comes through. So it helps a lot to do things a little early. So one of the things I've learned early on is not doing things in the last minute removes a lot of stress. And so in general, I'm not perfect by any means or stretch of imagination, but I generally try to do things a little ahead of time so that it becomes a little easier to work through things. Yeah,
I can imagine. So you find it more relaxing when you got control over things, or you know what's coming up, or
yeah.
But at the same time, you also say, well, I try not to think of it that much, or try not to look ahead that much. So how do you find the balance?
Question of spreading things around and looking ahead is important, but there's always reminders that kick in, and you schedule things along the way, and you know that something is coming up in a month or two. And it's not going to happen until you put your efforts towards it. So I would phase in and work on it maybe a month ahead or 6 weeks ahead. And then that way, when time comes, you have enough content ready for whatever that is, whether it's a course or a client meeting. And then that kind of removes the stress quite a bit. But also a lot of these journeys are very productive time for me. I can make use of an 8-hour or 9-hour flight is a great time to focus on a certain article to write or a chapter to write in a book. So a lot of productive work gets done during these travels. A lot of people may spend time watching movies on flights. To me, coding is more fun than watching movie. It beats every other in-flight entertainment. So that kind of helps quite a bit to kind of spread the time getting things prepared. So the travel is a very integral part of work as well. So a lot of work gets done during the travel. When people travel for vacation, or when they travel occasionally, it's a very different mode of transportation and travel. But when you travel for work, it becomes kind of part of the routine to get a lot of work done as well.
Yeah, and having no receival on the plane must have been a joy.
That is actually a blessing, definitely, yes.
All signals turned off, time to code.
Absolutely. Surprisingly, we are so dependent on the internet for a lot of things we look up. But at the same time, though, it's a great time where you don't have any interruptions. There's no Twitter, there's no Facebook. And that's one of the reasons why, honestly, even though almost all the flights I travel these days have internet connection, I make it a point not to turn on. And the reason is that 4 hours or that 6 hours or 8 hours is absolutely precious when you can just focus on one particular problem and not be interrupted by, so that definitely has a lot of value.
Yeah. So can we assume that when you skip your office your entire life, but you only be on a plane, you'll be 10 times more efficient?
No, actually I wouldn't go that far to say that, no. Well, there's aspects of human interaction that's extremely valuable in my opinion. I learn a lot from people critiquing my work. I learn a lot by critiquing other people's work as well. When you're looking at somebody's code, or when somebody else is looking at my code, and even the fact that somebody else is going to look at my code, I write it very differently. And when they do look at it, there are aspects they come up with, and you're like, wow, I did not think about it. So that human aspect is extremely valuable.
Yeah, of course.
And it's a balance I think we have to strike. There are times when I want to work with people, and then there are times when I want to be in isolation and spend some time thinking. And I think there's a balance we have to strike between the two, and going back and forth is very valuable.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. So when you're on that plane, you're coding away. What's your type of music you're playing? Is that the country we've been talking before, or are you completely in silence?
Actually, surprisingly though, I'm not a really. This may surprise you to hear this, but as much as how many different things I do, I'm really bad at multitasking. So one of the things that really helps me to succeed is the word compartmentalizing. And compartmentalizing is extremely important to be productive. So I plan my day actually pretty rigorously. And at any given time, there's like one thing I do. And if I'm writing code, I am writing code. If I need to think really deeply, I'm not one of those people who is smart enough or skilled enough to listen to a music and be able to code. So I do need silence, but not silence in the sense of quietness, because I spend a lot of time actually in a very crowded place to sit and work. In fact, I go to Starbucks quite a bit. When it is absolutely crowded, I would be sitting there and coding to the extent that anytime the family says, "Where's Venkat?" they would say he's working in Starbucks. To the extent my niece thought that I actually work in Starbucks. So when somebody asked, where does your uncle work? And she said, oh, he works in Starbucks. But I go to Starbucks to work because it's the ambient noise, which is great as long as nobody wants to talk to you. That's perfect. Yeah. But at the same time, what I've noticed is, even if I turn on a music or if I have a TV on, within seconds, I completely zone out. And if somebody, sitting next to me says, well, that's funny, or did you hear that? I'm like what? So I'm not hearing anything at that point. So over time, if I'm doing something less rigorous, I would turn on music. But if I'm doing something quite rigorous, and a lot of time it involves quite a bit of deep thinking, I usually don't bother to turn on anything. But I would have a headphone on, because that's usually a signal to the person next to me, don't bother, right? So that's one of the things that it's a visual cue. So the person sitting next to you in the airplane looks at you, is like, oh, he's got a headphone on, let me not bother.
Never mind.
So but it's not, there's a music, it's purely a, hey, it's a little signal to say, I want to be left alone, I want to be focusing and thinking right now, and I don't want to be bothered. And I think that there's definitely value in it.
Yeah, no, totally. And speaking of that case, with creating value and also creating value for other people, at which point did you decide to become a public speaker?
It really is, it goes back a lot before I did public speaking. This was way back in time when I was in graduate school, when my roommates or classmates would come to me and say, hey, looking at this problem, and I'm not able to understand, how does this work? And then I would take that and I say, hey, let me explain it to you. And then just to kind of set the stage, I actually have learning disabilities. I'm not the smartest kid. I actually failed in school. A lot of people would be surprised to hear that. And so I came out of a failure situation where I had a really hard time learning. And then as time went on, it almost took to a point where I had to figure out the methods that helped me to learn. And the traditional methods that people were trying to make me learn didn't work out at all. So I was a total failure when I tried all of those. And then once I figured out how to learn, my passion really was in twofold. One is learning things, but also to spend time thinking about what I learned. And I think one of the most important aspects of any developer is critical thinking. So I don't spend as much time reading, but I spend a lot more time thinking. And so when I did that, when I was in school, my classmates or roommates would come and say, I don't get this problem, how does this work? And then I would sit there and explain how this works, and they were like, whoa, why is this so darn simple when you explain it? And I've been struggling with this for days, and I couldn't understand it. And the tipping point for all of this was, I was a teaching assistant in graduate school, and my job was to literally grade. That's all I had to do. So they would give you papers to grade, and then you score them, and you give points to students. And I don't know what happened, but the professor came to me one day and said, well, I got an exam on Wednesday or Monday of next week, and I've been teaching this course, I'm kind of tired. So on Wednesday, I want you to come to the class and answer the questions for the students. And I'm like, okay, he's killing me because I've not been in the class and I'm just a grader, and now he wants me to be in front of the students and answer questions before the exam. So I'm like, okay, I'm dead.
Quite exciting.
I was like absolutely nervous, and I frantically read the book, what is going to happen. So I go to the class, And the professor is sitting in the back of the room just to make sure that things don't go south. And I stand up and I said, okay, I'm here to answer questions. What do you want to know? And students start asking questions. This was in computer architecture. And how does this work and how does that work? And I start explaining how things work. And that was the first day I'm actually in front of the students explaining how things work in a class that I've never been to. And then I finished the class, and the students came back and said, whoa, that really made a difference because we are actually able to understand these concepts that we had difficulty understanding before. And then I kind of went back to my room that night and said, okay, that's probably not a bad idea to teach. And that's kind of what really gave me the inspiration to teach those two events. And then I started teaching at the university since then. So I was teaching in the university for, I'm going to say, maybe about 10 years, give or take, before I spoke in conferences.
Oh, wow.
And it was a really slow journey to go into conferences. I got excited about it. I tried to apply to conferences to speak, and nobody wanted me to speak. And then eventually, of course, there is the breakthrough, as they say, and then of course, then I got the chance to speak, and then continued to speak.
Sure.
So, but I came in after speaking for several years, so that made a big difference as well.
So, what fired up your passion for teaching? Was it to help people understand certain things, or what sparks you?
There are two aspects to it. One is a selfish part, which I'm absolutely curious to really learn deeper. And one of the things I've realized is, oftentimes people say, hey, I have 10 years of experience in the industry, 15 years. But I usually think that these numbers really don't mean anything, because it's not about the time you spend, it's the depth to which you go into. And what I realized over time was, when you are sitting and programming at work, you're almost always chasing the problem at hand. And in a way, while you're gaining experience, to a certain extent, you are that stone that skips on the water because you're hitting enough to solve a problem, and then you have the next problem to go into. But that experience is very critical, right? I always tell people who teach, never teach without actually doing it. But on the flip side, I always tell people, don't just do things without teaching. And the reason for that is, when you're standing in front of an audience and you're trying to teach something, you're not just telling what you're thinking, your mind is constantly processing it. And one of the most effective things is, when you're talking about a particular topic, the humans have this beautiful way of communicating non-verbally. The facial expressions are amazing. So when you're saying something, the person in front of you, their face changes color, and it shows a quizzical, like, what in the world are you talking about? Versus, oh, I get it, right? And so there is this feedback loop going between the person giving the talk and the person in front of you. And when you say something, when they don't really understand it, your mind is immediately processing and saying, well, they're not getting it, which means you're not delivering it in the right way. And then suddenly you realize, oh my gosh, I don't understand this, right? I'm trying to teach something, and again, that's the stone hitting the water. You thought you understood it, but you need to go a little deeper. And one example I can never forget is, I've been teaching, I used to teach C++ back in time, and I had been teaching this stuff for about 4 years. And on that particular day, I'm teaching a certain concept, and I can clearly see that nobody has a clue what I'm talking about, right? They're like, what are you talking about? This doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, I've been teaching this for years. Why is this so hard to understand? And everybody's like, don't know, we don't understand this. And then I went back home that night, and I was sitting there thinking about it. And then I suddenly realized that I did not understand what I thought I had understood. And this is after, 4 or 5 years of teaching this stuff. And that was very nerve-wracking experience.
I can imagine.
To understand finally that you don't understand. And I spent the next 3-4 hours digging deeper into it. And then suddenly, it's like a little door opens, and then you see this room that you never knew exist.
You hear the heavenly bells.
It's kind of like that. And then the next day I go and explain it, and people are like, gosh, this is so simple.
Why haven't you told us
why,
before?
why didn't you explain it this way, yesterday?
Yeah.
I said, well, the reason is I didn't understand this yesterday. and I, thanks to you, I have a better understanding. So one of the reasons I want to really teach is it makes me a better student. That's the first reason. And I always tell people, when I teach, I am the very first student in my class. And I'm the one learning. That's a selfish part of me. But then, the other excitement for me is to really make the journey a little bit more interesting and exciting and meaningful for the other person. One of the things that we are dealing with today is we live in a very complex world. And there are people who will take complex things and make it even more complicated. And there are people who will take simple things and make it complicated. If I can, in a very small way, take something complex, but if I can make it simple, where somebody says, oh, this is actually approachable for me, and to remove that jargon, to remove that clout around things. And then sometimes people say, wow, this is not exciting, this is simple. And I'm like, yeah, it doesn't have to be really so hard to understand. And that is one of my desire is to really simplify it. But the journey to simplify things is a really hard journey, because you're going to hit the wall and you're trying to struggle. And honestly, there are times when I would literally, that's a luxury that I have, thankfully. I have the luxury to waste 2 days of my life doing absolutely nothing but taking a problem and beating it for 2 days. And I would sit there for 6-7 hours on a Saturday and say, I just want to crack this. I would write code, I would delete it, I would throw it away, rewrite it. And at the end of about 7 or 8 hours, I'll have a very distilled code that actually works. And a lot of people don't have that luxury, because they don't have the ability to spend 8 or 9 hours because they have other commitments they have to run to. And for me, is the ability to say, yeah, I've got a lot of other things to do, but I'm going to carve out these 7-8 hours on this one problem, because it's very well worth really understanding this. And then when I do, it allows me to distill these ideas. So to answer your question in such a long way, the reason I teach is really the journey to take these complex ideas and to be able to distill it. And that journey is extremely rewarding, and the byproduct and the side effect of it is that I can maybe in a small way help other people to understand it too. But in all honesty, for most part, I do this because I'm just curious to really take these ideas and bring it down to the level where I can comprehend it. Because I get really anxious, I get really agitated when I deal with things that are vague. I need to have things very tangible. When I read a new technology or a new architecture, I actually get very angry because it's hand waving. Oh, this happens, that happens. I'm like, show me the code, right? I want to know how this works. And that dissatisfaction is part of the reason for me.
Sounds great. Yeah. So looking at you as a Rockstar developer, because we're obviously here at Rockstars today, we launched your event. I think it was sold out within the blink of an eye. How does that make you feel?
In all honesty, I'll be absolutely, totally honest about it. I never consider myself as a Rockstar programmer. I would say I am probably a below average programmer. That's the way I always look at myself. And the reason really is, it is really a magnitude of scale in my opinion. The amount of unknown is just overwhelming for me. There is so much that I don't know. And when I start learning these things, when I read a concept or when I look at a particular idea, it just intrigues me. And then I have to struggle with it for sometimes weeks, months, sometimes even years, honestly. Sometimes I would just get absolutely tickled and excited. And then my wife would like, wow, you're so excited, what's happening? I'm like, you don't look at this, I finally understand this stuff, right? It's been so hard. So to me, that journey is exciting. And in all honesty, things don't click for me like that. It is a struggle, it's a journey. And so when people say you're a rockstar developer, I'm like, no, that's the wrong word to use. I'm a struggling programmer. That's what I really am. And then that's perfectly okay with me, because to me, that is the exciting part. Is I am just this little small human in this journey of this universe, right? When you look at the magnitude of the universe we live in, and the time we are spending in this world is not even a speck, right? It's such a small unit of time. And in that unit of time, there is so much to learn, and there's so much to really enjoy. And to me, that enjoyment of looking at these ideas and learning it, and the struggle to really understand these things, I think my life would be very boring if I just got these, right? So I would want to emphasize, I am not a rockstar programmer. I'm a struggling programmer, and that's what really excites me. And I'm humbled. I'm thankful that developers are excited to sign up for the talks, and they want to listen to it. And it's just me. I wear my excitement on my sleeves. I truly get excited about the technologies and the concepts, and I can endlessly talk about how computer programs work, because to me it was a hard journey. When I started learning programming, it was really hard. When I was in school, I had to learn programming when I had no access to computers, and I had no machines available to me, but I was curious. So I actually learned algorithms before I started learning programming. And algorithms are, you could draw a flow chart, you can reason about it, and the compiler was oftentimes my uncle, who would look at my algorithm and say whether this will work or not. And occasionally I would get access to a computer. And when I started learning to program, it was a very hard shift to realize that you could actually make a machine do things. And once I got a little bit better at it, and it took me maybe about 5 or 6 years of struggle, and I don't think I've ever lost that excitement in me to say that you can actually make something work. And I do this almost every single day. I would wake up in the morning and I would spend 3-4 hours when I would be writing a code, and I would spend 3 hours just making the code a little bit more concise. And to me that's important, because what that tells me is that I understand how things actually work. And having that kind of sense that you understand how things work helps you to know that you can go conquer, or at least attack, a bigger complexity. And that's all I do when I speak. I kind of bring that excitement out, and maybe that's what programmers, gives them a hope that if this little guy can do, I can do it too. So maybe that's the reason.
That's why we were sold out in 5 minutes. I see. So how do you cope with all the fame? 200 rockstar developers aching to see you.
I'll tell you honestly how you do that. I've got an amazing family that reminds me that I'm still a small human being. To give you an example of this, I travel a lot, so I'm not home too much. But there was one day I was in the kitchen when my kids and my wife were having a pretty heated conversation about something they have to make a decision on. And as they were making these decisions, and I suddenly blurted out, said, we could do it this way. And then they all calmed down. And then my wife gave me a stare and said, sweetie, you're a visitor in this house. You don't have we don't have voting rights. And I'm like, awesome. This absolutely nails you down. And so in a way, that's the aspect of it. This again goes back to what I said earlier, is compartmentalizing. I have been very fortunate to meet some amazingly knowledgeable people in my life throughout, and I have learned immensely from so many of them. I could not speak English when I was 17 years old, and I could not write a sentence in English properly when I wanted to write books, but there have been such amazing people who took me under their wings and showed me how to think, showed me how to write, critiqued and sit down with me and say, let me show you how you can actually write it. And when I look at all these people who have been so generous in improving me, there is absolutely no reason for me to even spend a minute thinking, that I'm famous or that I am any good, because we all benefit and learn from each other. Every single day we do. And I have learned and benefited. I wouldn't be here sitting and talking to you if not for those kind people who took the time to help me. And it's absolutely my responsibility professionally to help another person. And that is the focus. The focus should be to help somebody who's there, and as much as others have helped me in the past and are still helping me in the past. And that's one of the reasons I love the community, is we live in a very harsh world. When you look at the news, it's pretty scary things we hear, but I'm absolutely blessed because I run into people every single day who are absolutely genuine, who are kind, who are eager to learn and eager to help somebody else. And so we're definitely blessed to be in that community. And that is what is on my mind, is to say how privileged we really are to have that ability to mingle in a community where every one of us brings different strengths with us. And then that's one of the things that is very critical, is every single person is capable of doing something remarkable. I love mountain hiking. And there was one day I was hiking the mountain and I was so proud. I was like, this is awesome, look, I'm close to the summit. And then I turned around and looked down, and in a distance I saw a guy who had a very small shorts, no shirt, a shoe, and then I saw him running uphill. And I'm pointing to my wife and saying, do you see that dude over there? And before we could say the next thing, he just zips through and then jumps on the rocks and he vanishes. And I'm like, what just happened? And then it made me realize, the skill that this person has in terms of climbing the mountain. And here I was so proud that I'm almost close to the summit, and I've taken several hours to come to this point, and he just runs the stretch, right? And I'm like, there is a complete difference in scale to what my capabilities are and to what his capabilities are. And I see this almost in every single instance. Anywhere I even get a stretch of thought that, oh, I'm awesome, then you turn around and you see somebody who's just running across and you're like, oh, never mind that. So the world around is, if we just look around, we never have an opportunity to get that, excited about what we are, because things are just absolutely phenomenal, and the people around me are absolutely awesome, and I have the opportunity to learn from them every single day. I'm blessed to be there.
Can imagine. Sweet. So you love to Twitter, right?
I tweet from time to time, but I'm not. I try to spend minimum time on it, but not too often.
Wow, that's maximum efficiency then, because we've been seeing a lot of tweets pass by in a couple of days, and my beloved colleague Miriam has assembled a few. And we're gonna address them on the screen.
All right.
Maybe just share your thoughts on them. So the first one is that feeling when you go from I can't talk about this for more than 2 minutes to how do I condense this to within 1 hour? Knowledge hides in layers. Your words.
Yes. Oh, these are the tweets I love. So I wanted to give a talk about type inference. And so I wanted to give this talk in the Java 1, the Code 1 conference, as it's renamed now. And I was so happy that they accepted to, decided to accept it. But the Dallas Java user group, Eric Weber's a good friend of mine. He said, hey, we picked this topic. I'm like, oh, this is going to be 2 months ahead of schedule. So I said, okay, I'll prepare for this talk. I had not planned for getting it ready for 2 months, but I'm going to give it ahead of time. And if you really look at the topic of type inference, right? Oh, well, what do you want to talk about type inference? Okay, there's a var keyword in Java 10, and here's how we use it as a local type inference. And then I sit down to think about it, and all of a sudden, a talk that you could maybe give in 2 minutes, there is this layers and layers and layers of things you want to really talk about. And you realize that in a way, it's kind of like hiking the mountain. I always refer to one of my passion as programming and hiking the mountains. But you want to get to the summit, but you don't just go to the summit. You have
Unless
to kind
you're
of
that
right. Unless you're that guy, absolutely. I can't. and you have to kind of go, through the switchbacks. And in a lot of ways, when you want to really bring up a point to a developer so that they can, understand and appreciate and adapt, you want to really lay the grounds gradually, walking them through. And so the minute I sat down, I'm like, wow, there's like so much to really talk about. And now you're trying to condense it into the time. What was actually exciting is, in this particular talk, I go in, there were probably about 120 people in the room, and I start the talk, and people are so involved. This talk went for 2 hours, actually. And I had absolute great time, and a lot of people there had a great time as well. We were debating. At some point, we were kind of close to, should we call the security now? But it was an exciting.
Lights going down, yeah, of course.
But it was, and that's what excites me is that there's so much depth to really what you want to get into, and you can go as deeper as you want to in certain topic, or you can be as shallow about it. But the more you think about it, the more you realize there is to think about. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. Well, okay, yeah. So generation of developers may have grown to. What a long tweet, by the way.
That's definitely not 140.
A generation of developers may have grown to ignore quality, partly due to their business environments. But the biggest concern is the lack of skills that they have failed to develop to care for quality, even when placed in a situation that facilitates or necessitates high quality. So one of the concerns I'm having more and more is, I go and work with different organizations. I consult, I mentor, I teach, and what I notice a lot of times is they're in a mode where we got to deliver this. We don't have time to write better quality code. We don't have time to write shorter functions. We don't have time to give better names for variables. We don't have time to write automated testing. So they're
just
always
chasing deadlines.
They're chasing the deadlines. The problem I see very significant is, it's okay to chase these deadlines, but when we chase these deadlines and deliver the product, and then the next release comes through and we're chasing the deadline, and then we do this over and over and over, days become weeks and weeks becomes months and months become years, and now you have a junior developer who has been always developing code in that tight mode, chasing the deadline, and 5-10 years into it, they become a little bit more mature and senior, but they haven't really taken the time to develop the skill to develop quality code. And as a result, years have gone by, and at that point, when you put them in a situation where they need to develop quality, they don't have the ability to do that because they never had the opportunity. It's a learning curve.
To roam
it's a skill.
freely and
It's a learning curve. It's a skill, and if we don't take the time to develop the skill, we can acquire it overnight. When I went to an organization to teach TDD, and they said, there's the CTO was in the room, and he said, "This is all great. I love what you're saying, but I want a timeline. Tell me how long my developers will take to get good at it." And I said, "Oh, I'm thank you for bringing me here for a training, but they need about maybe a year to year and a half, maybe 2 years before they can become productive." And he was visibly upset. He said, "Oh my God, I thought you will leave today and they'll be writing automated tests and get really good at it." Well, no, we need time to make mistakes. We need time to do it and then critique it and improve it. And if we don't take that 6 months to a year to 2 years to get better, and if we cut short and say, no, we don't have time for it right now, it's kind of like you're trying to learn to bicycle. But you get on a bike, and in 2 minutes I say, no, you don't have time to learn bicycle now. We'll come back 2 months from now. And then when you come back 2 months from now, you get on the bike and say, no, 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 you don't have time right now. I never give you the time. Well, you learn bicycling when you start riding on it. You fall, you bruise your knee, and somebody holds with you. And then maybe if you're really a small kid, maybe you learn within a couple of hours. If you're an old person like me, maybe you need a few months to really learn. But that's one of the concerns I have is it's not that we are not spending time on quality, it's that we are not getting the skill we need to develop quality. One of the concerns I'm having is when organizations develop poor quality software, I'm beginning to see more and more lawsuits that are being created because the receiver of the software is filing a lawsuit because of the money they have lost because of poor quality. And I'm not suggesting I'm happy for this, but we are going to get to a time when our industry is going to get regulated. This is what we are going to bring upon ourselves, unfortunately. And when the regulation happens, there's going to be law that requires us to deliver better quality. Kind of like what a medical industry is going through right now, isn't it? If you look at 1820, in 1820, literally doctors walked around with blood on their coat. And these doctors didn't know better. And they thought they were great doctors when they had blood on their coat. Eventually they discovered that the doctors were carrying infection from one patient to another. The mortality rate was very high. If somebody survived surgery, they were dead in 6 weeks. And the reason was the infection that these doctors carried around. When they understood germ theory, and then they started putting in place all the constraints to sterilize and make sure that we are protective of the germs being carried over, and there's a cost associated with that in the medical industry. If we want to cut cost, we can reuse the syringe, but we don't dare to do that. And I think our profession, right now, if you ask me what year it is, it's not 2018, it's 1820.
Yeah.
And that's where we are in our field. And there's going to be a time when we realize that we, because of our lack of quality and lack of discipline, are causing this huge cost, causing these failures. And when things become to the point where the cost of failure is very critical, and then we are getting to the point already because the software is being used in every aspect of human life. If you think about the cost of failure, if the cost of failure is small, we don't have to have that much discipline. When the cost of failure is high, when human life is involved, when huge financial loss is involved, we're going to change the way we do things. And when that happens, it's the developers who never were given an opportunity to spend time on discipline and quality are going to suffer the most. And the people who have taken the time to, go through that process of learning and investing and practicing the craft of the skill will be in a better situation. I'm hoping I'll retire before that happens, but I'm also afraid that that's going to happen, and that's kind of what that came out as more of a concern about where our industry is.
Yeah. So looking at that environment where people are giving the time to practice, giving their time for failure, because we here at Rockstar specialize in getting people at the perfect spot, so making sure that the click's there, that the environment's perfect. How important is the perfect environment for a developer?
It is incredibly important. One of the reasons for that is if you take a group of, let's say, 10 people who are doing very good disciplined work, and you take one person who doesn't have that opportunity, and you put them in the team, there are 10 people around that person who are raising the bar, right? Now reverse this. You have a team which doesn't care about quality, they are not given the opportunity, and you bring a developer who is very sincere and cares about quality, and you drop them, there are people trying to pull that person down. So the environment makes a huge difference. When people talk about culture, I always say culture is not about a country. Culture is not about a language. Culture is within a team. It's not even a company. I work in large organizations as a consultant. I would walk across a floor and I would see 6 different cultures on that floor. And there'll be one team which is doing really good disciplined work. They are focusing on developing quality work, and they are agile. But their agility is sustained agility. They're able to deliver with high quality, with a great speed, because they slowed down when they had to slow down, so they're able to gain speed when they can gain speed. A lot of other organizations went at breakneck speed without slowing down, and now they have slowed down because they don't have the ability to go faster. So to me, that culture is important. And in my early part of my career, I had the opportunity to work in both sets of teams where the culture did not care about quality. And then I worked in teams where they cared about quality, and it was an eye-opening for me, because when the people around you are different, we have this tendency to be conformant, right? If I'm among a group of people, I try to do things like all those people, right? That's what every single one of us do. So if the people around you, the good old saying, right? Tell me about your friends, I'll tell about you. There's a reason for it. But the same thing can be extended. Tell about your team's culture, I'll tell about you, right? So that's why the environment is absolutely important.
Well, that's a nice one to close this one down. Well, we've prepared something special for you. Since we at Rockstars here love to hand out presents with a funny edge, so to say. So we love humor. Everyone in the room is wearing.
I'm not sure if they're actually wearing it.
Maybe they're wearing it, maybe they're not wearing it. But oh wait, by the way, I'm gonna hand it to you. You're gonna
all right.
You're able to hand it out yourself. So
all right,
let's go.
Oh wow, look at that! Beautiful.
So yellow and black are our colors.
Oh my goodness! This is awesome. Well, okay, so I don't think I can wear this though.
We just absolutely loved the mustache. We're getting a print of you where it pops out lovely on our club colors, yellow and black.
I love it. I love the color. I love the shirt.
So
thank you.
Don't be scared if anyone in the room is wearing one of those. They have one as well. So.
Thank you so much.
I
was not expecting this. Thank you very much.
No problem. You're welcome. Well, so then it's time to head off, I guess, right?
Yes, let's go.
Perfect.
Very good. Thank you.